All right, good morning.
So this video is factoring by GCF. I have a video that's factoring by GCF and factoring trinomials when a equals 1, but if you haven't factored by GCF in a while, I thought it would be nice to give you a video that's just factoring by GCF and that are problems in the style of what you can expect from me for the week's assignment. All right, so we're going to talk about what GCF is. I'm going to show you numeric examples, I'm going to show you variable examples, and then I'm going to do like the full problems. All right, so GCF stands for greatest common factor.
Mom.
Sorry, I got a kid interrupting me. Yeah, kid, what's up?
This thing not on.
Maybe it's dead. Maybe you need to grab the charger off the counter. Sorry, Kindle. All right. Greatest common factor. So what it is it's the largest number or variable or both you can divide terms by. All right, so be careful. People get GCF and LCD confused. GCF is greatest common factor, but it's generally going to be a number that is as big as your smallest number or smaller. So even though it's called the greatest, it generally is it's actually like a number smaller than what you're looking at, whereas an LCD is generally going to be bigger than what you're looking at because it's a multiple, and multiples are bigger and factors are smaller. All right, so let's just do a generic example. Find the GCF of 12 and 32. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do multiples of 12 and 32. I'm going to do the factors of 12 and 32. I like to do my factors in numeric order so that I don't ever lose pieces. So I always start with 1 times the number. So 1 times 12, because there are numbers where their GCF is 1, or it would be possible that the GCF could be this number. So I want to make sure I take into account that 1 times 12 is 12. Then I go up to 2. 2 goes into 12 6 times. Then I check 3. Does 3 go into 12? It does. 3 goes into 12 4 times. And now I'm finished because notice I go 1, 2, 3, and the 4 is in my second column. So if there'd been anything bigger than 4, I would have already found it because I went in order. All right, now watch with 32. Same idea. Okay. Okay, 32. So 1 times 32. Let's see, 2 times 16. 3 doesn't go in evenly because 3 times 10 is 30, and then 3 times 11 is 33. If you have a hard time listing factors, you can get the calculators to do it, or you can just divide, right? Take your calculator and say 32 divided by 2, 32 divided by 3, 32 divided by 4. All right, so 32 divided by 4 is 8. 32 does not divide evenly by 5. It does not divide evenly by 6. And it does not divide evenly by 7. So now I can stop because notice, 1, 2, 4, here's 8. 5, 6, and 7 didn't work. If 8's in my second column, then I've already found every number bigger than 8 that factors because I went in order. Now we look through the list and we look for the biggest number that they have in common. They both have a 1 in common. They both have a 2 in common. They don't have a 3. They have a 4 in common. They don't have a 6 or an 8 in common. And so their biggest factor is going to be that common 4. All right, they had a 1 in common, they had a 2 in common, but the greatest number we could divide them both by is 4. Okay, so the first trick is finding the GCF. The second trick is going to be actually dividing the GCF out of a polynomial. So let's do another GCF with numbers, then we'll talk variables, and then we'll talk how do you actually divide it out. Okay, let's do find the GCF of, I don't know, 7 and 35. Now, if you are decent with multiplication, you can generally find the GCF pretty fast for a lot of these. So if that's the case, that's great. Factors of 7 are 1 times 7, and that's it. This is a prime number. But that means then that their GCF can only either be 1 or 7. 35 is 1 and 35, so they definitely have 1 in common. However, they also have 7 in common, so our GCF here is 7. Notice the GCF was the smaller of the two numbers, but it wasn't bigger than both of them. All right, in the last example, we had 12 and 32. the GCF was smaller than both of them. So even though it's the greatest common factor, it usually ends up being a number smaller than or as large as your smallest. Now, the next thing that happens would be variables. And there's just a rule for variables. I can show you why it is the way that it is, but you can just remember the rule if it works for you. All right. So say I want to find the GCX of x squared and x to the third. You could list factors, right? You could say, okay, 1 times x squared, then x times x. For x to the third, you could say 1 times x to the third, then x times x squared, and then you're pretty much done. But what you need to know is the GCF for variables will always be, between the variables, the smaller power, right? Because notice, they have an x squared in common. If I'm taking something out, if I'm dividing out, I can't take more x's from this pile than it has. So if this pile is 2 x's and this pile is 3 x's, the most I can ever take is 2 x's. Therefore, it wouldn't be okay for me to try to take more than 2 from here. If I can take 2 from the smaller pile, then I can for sure take 2 from the bigger pile. So my GCF is x squared. And it's always the variable to the smallest power. Now, of course, what happens next is they start combining things. So, for example, they might say, find the GCF of 12x squared and 32x to the third. Well, we already know the GCF of 12 and 32 is 4, and we know the GCF of x squared and x to the third is x squared. So my GCF is just the combination of the GCF of the numbers and the GCF of the variables, right? So you do GCF of the numbers, then you do GCF of variables. Now, we are going to be asked to actually divide by this. And I found as I've been teaching that this is something that kids really struggle with. So it's interesting because they can do a lot of the more complicated factoring, but for some reason GCF sort of throws them off. So we're going to actually take the numbers I just used, but we're going to do it in an actual factoring form. All right, so instructions. Factor by GCF, 12x squared plus 32x to the third. All right, now here are the steps. Find the GCF of the numbers first, okay? So what's the GCF of 12 and 32? We know it's 4 because we already did that. If it was a new problem where we didn't know the GCF, we just do that same process, factor and find the GCF. If you have a TI on your calculator, like on your phone, or you actually have a TI at home, in the math menu, I believe it's in num, there's one called GCD. So like you could go into math, arrow over to number. When you hit enter in GCD, you could hit 12, 32. And then when you hit enter, it gives you your GCF, okay? But you don't have to have a calculator to do this. I almost never do it on a calculator unless it's really big numbers. All right, so our GCF is 4. Now we need to find GCF of the variables. And that is x squared. Now we're going to write the GCF outside the front of a parentheses, because what we're doing is we're unmultiplying, we're undistributing. That's what factoring is. So I'm going to write 4x squared, and then I'm going to put a parentheses. And what's going to go in the parentheses is what's left after I divide. So now I'm going to divide all of these by the GCF. Okay, so what is 12 divided by 4? 12 divided by 4 is 3. And then x squared divided by x squared, because they're the same, they divide to 1 and they reduce. So they're sort of gone, all right? You can remember that it's subtraction of powers. So if the powers are the same, they sort of subtract each other away. All right, 32 divided by 4 is 8. And then if I have x to the third on top and x squared on the bottom, I get canceling and I'm left with just that one x, because I had 3 and I took 2 out. So I get 3 plus 8x. Now, if you want to check, and this is optional, you can check by distribution. All right, so if I was like, well, I don't know if I got the right answer or not, I could multiply it back out. To make sure it matches the original. But you don't need to do that. This is the answer. Okay, so let's do another one. Gotta find my eraser. I have a little square one and it's sort of just ended up all over the place. I am tired of technology. I'm sort of ready to be back at school. Although I'm not sure that would be a popular opinion, but I would rather be teaching this to you live than doing this on video and having you do online stuff, just personally. All right, let's factor by GCF. Let's do something like 5x to the third plus 10x squared minus 15x. Okay, so you can have more than one term. So now when we find the GCF of the numbers, it's going to be the GCF of 5, 10, and 15. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5, 1 and 10, 2 and 5, 1 and 15, 3 and 5. So our GCF is 5. Now for my powers, who's my smallest power? My smallest power is this x to the first, so that's my GCF. So now I'm going to put 5x to the first outside of the parentheses, and what's going to be left in the parentheses is what's there after I divide all of them by the GCF. I am undistributing. All right, 5 divided by 5 is 1. X to the third divided by x to the first, right? We get a loss of 1. We subtract 3 minus 1, so we get x squared. Positive 10 divided by 5 is a positive 2. X squared divided by x to the first, we take 2 minus 1, which is x to the first, right? We have 2 on top, 1 on the bottom. Cancel. And then negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3, and x to the first over x to the first disappears. So that is my answer. Okay? Now, if you are struggling with this, if you find that you're having a hard time with it, if you're trying the properties, if you're having just problem with the tech, if you come to my office hours, if you make an appointment with me for when time works for you and we do hours together, those are all ways that you can earn credit, all right? The stuff I have online is like options. But if you're having trouble with the stuff online, then let's figure out a way for this to work for you. If it means you take pictures of stuff and email me pictures, if it means we meet in my office hours or in some sort of office hours that work for you and we talk about it like live human beings, okay? If you have questions, you can leave them in the comments. You can send me an email. You can send me a remind. You can leave a comment in Classroom. Right? Just get a hold of me so that I can help you. This whole week's assignment is going to be factor by GCF. We're going to move forward with factoring the next week. All right. Thank you guys. I'll talk to you later.